twist story.
Claire is a 25-year-old beautiful and charming woman, born into a wealthy and influential family. Growing up, she was always sheltered by her family, but she decided to give up everything to pursue love with James, a man who isn't wealthy but has passion and ambition for life. Claire loves James deeply and is willing to sacrifice everything, including her relationship with her family, to build a life of her own. James, 30 years old, is a well-dressed and suave man, but behind his polished appearance lies a man driven by greed and ambition. James initially loved Claire, but his life became more stable and comfortable. He began to change. He no longer spent time with Claire and gradually got lost in a relationship with another woman. Claire's father, 60 years old, is a stern, powerful man with significant influence in society. He is the head of the family and always protective of his children. While he did not approve of Claire leaving her family to be with James, he still watches over her and is ready to help when needed. Claire's father is wise and has far-reaching vision. Claire's mother, 50 years old, is a gentle yet strong woman, always ready to sacrifice to protect her children. Though she disapproved of Claire's decision to marry James, she loves and worries about her daughter. She is intelligent and has great insight, and will not hesitate to help Claire when she needs it. The close assistant to Claire's father, male, around 30 to 35 years old, is always by Claire's father's side, helping him manage business affairs and important relationships. He is calm and composed, with a polite demeanor, always loyal to Claire's father, but also has his own hidden agenda. James' mistress, female, around 25 to 28 years old, is the daughter of a wealthy family and the head of the department in James' company. She is beautiful, loves to party, and always uses her charm to get what she wants. She is not in love with James, but uses him for personal gain, aiming to advance her own ambitions. The scene opens in a luxurious mansion nestled quietly in an affluent neighborhood, where the golden rays of the morning sun filtered through large windows, sparkling in the early morning air. Each beam of light cut through the glass, creating warm streaks across the polished wooden floor. Claire, a beautiful woman in her mid-20s, stood alone by the grand window, her eyes gazing out at the greenery beyond, where the trees swayed gently in the breeze. A cool gust of wind blew in, ruffling her long hair, and the sunlight bathed her smooth skin. She smiled faintly, but the smile was tinged with loneliness, as if the sunlight could not chase away the shadows in her heart. Her eyes grew distant, and she closed them as memories of the past flooded her mind. Her voice, soft and melancholic, echoed in the silence of the room, narrating her thoughts as if speaking to herself, though no one was there to listen. Claire, narrating in her thoughts, "I used to be a privileged young woman, born into a family of wealth and influence. My life was like a dream, everything perfect: a mansion, cars, designer clothes. Everything I could ever need was always there. But there was one thing missing: true love. I had everything, but I was still lonely. I lived under the weight of my family's expectations, trapped in a life where everything was planned for me, everything was set in place, except for my heart. My heart wanted something more. I needed a love that wasn't about status or wealth." Her mind drifted back to the day it all began, to the day she met James. Back then, Claire had everything a person could want: beauty, wealth, status. She was the shining star of high society, the one everyone admired, the one everyone envied. But despite all of that, her world felt hollow, as though something essential was missing. The love she longed for couldn't be found in designer clothes or glittering parties. It wasn't until James came into her life that she realized what true love meant. James was nothing like the men her family had expected her to marry. He wasn't wealthy. He didn't have the prestigious name that was supposed to match her own. He wasn't a man of grandeur or luxury. He didn't come from old money or a well-known family. He was ambitious, hard-working, and had a warmth in his smile that made Claire's heart beat faster. For the first time, Claire felt seen, truly seen. He looked at her not as a possession to be admired, but as a person, as a woman with hopes, dreams, and a heart capable of deep love. He made her believe that love wasn't about what you had, but who you had. "I loved him like I loved my own life," she thought. I loved him so much that I was willing to leave it all behind. My family, my wealth, my comfortable life. They didn't accept him. They didn't understand him, or me. They couldn't see what I saw in him, and they tried to stop me from loving him. But I didn't care. I was certain our love could overcome anything. Her mind wandered back to the moment when her parents found out about her secret love affair with James. The day she introduced him to them was the day her world began to crumble. Her father, a tall and imposing man, stood in the doorway of the grand living room, eyes narrowing as Claire introduced James to him. His voice was firm, full of authority, and Claire could feel the weight of his disapproval even before he spoke. He looked at James, then back at her, his face a mask of disbelief. "What is this, Claire?" he asked, his voice thick with disdain. "You, my daughter, with someone like him? What are you thinking? This isn't a fairy tale. You can't waste your life on someone who has nothing to offer but dreams." Claire felt her heart crack, the tension in the room suffocating her. Her mother, though quieter, was no less formidable. She turned to Claire with disappointment etched on her face. "This is not the life we've prepared for you," her mother said softly, her words a sharp contrast to her father's harshness. "You have everything. Why settle for someone who can offer you nothing?" The pain in Claire's chest was unbearable, but she stood tall. James was not a man who fit their mold, but he was the only man who had ever made her feel alive. Still, her parents' words were like arrows, each one striking her heart. They locked her in her room that night, trying to force her to see reason, to turn away from James and forget the man she had fallen for. They told her she could have anyone she wanted, someone with power, someone who could elevate her in the world, but James wasn't part of that world. He didn't fit into the life they had planned for her. For the first time, Claire felt as though she was being suffocated by the very people who were supposed to love and protect her. Her father's voice thundered from the other side of the door. "You will not see him again. We won't let you throw your future away." But Claire's heart had already made up its mind. She was determined to be with James, and she knew that love was worth more than any mansion or car or legacy. That night, Claire packed her things and left. She didn't care that her parents disapproved. She didn't care that they locked the doors or tried to control her every move. She left everything, her family, her world, her life of privilege, to follow her heart, to love James. She remembered the cold wind as she walked out into the night, her heart racing. The streets felt unfamiliar, but her heart was certain. James was worth every sacrifice. Claire, narrating, "I knew then that I would never regret this decision. No matter how much they tried to control me, no matter how much they tried to steer me away from him, I was ready to live my life the way I wanted. For once, I would live for me." As she stood in the mansion now, looking out at the world she had built with James, Claire couldn't help but feel a pang of loss. She had followed her heart, but in doing so, she had also lost so much. Yet, in the quiet of the room, with the sunlight streaming in, she also realized something. The love she had fought for, the love she had chosen, was worth everything. That night, Claire didn't turn back. Though her heart ached and her mind was clouded by the storm of change, she remained firm. James welcomed her into his arms, but it was not the rescue she had hoped for. Everything had shifted. They lived in a small apartment now, where there were no dazzling lights, no luxurious parties, and no important calls from business partners. Claire didn't regret her decision, but sometimes she felt the price of the love she had chosen. James, though the man she loved, had his own concerns. He wasn't wealthy, and he couldn't meet the expectations Claire had unknowingly carried with her from her past. At first, he worked harder than ever to sustain their life. But as the days passed, he began to tire. Long workdays and unreachable dreams left him feeling distant, not the passionate man he had been at the start. Claire could feel it in his every look, every late return home, when his eyes no longer sparkled with excitement, but were clouded with exhaustion. One evening, when James came home drunk, Claire noticed something that made her heart ache. He stumbled through the door, his clothes disheveled, the stench of alcohol heavy in the air. Claire noticed a lipstick stain on his collar, a mark she couldn't ignore. She couldn't speak. She just stood there, staring, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of the scene before her. James didn't say a word, simply walked past her into their bedroom, leaving Claire frozen in place. Her mind whirled, her stomach turned. She wasn't ready to believe it, but the evidence was clear. James had betrayed her. Claire, thinking to herself, how could he do this? He's mine. He's supposed to be mine. She couldn't bring herself to speak. The words were lodged in her throat, too painful to say. But Claire was not one to sit idly by when confronted with something so crucial. She needed the truth. She needed to know exactly what was going on. The next day when James went off to work, Claire kept her composure. She didn't let on that anything was wrong. She acted as if nothing had changed. But inside, a storm raged. She followed him, quietly observing from the shadows, not wanting him to know she was watching. She trailed him to a nearby coffee shop, not far from his office, and then she saw it. There, in front of her, was Sophie, the beautiful young woman Claire had only ever heard about in passing. Sophie was sitting with James, laughing and talking closely. The way they shared glances, the way their bodies leaned toward each other, it was all so intimate, so casual. Claire's heart shattered as she watched them, her chest tightening with every second. It was clear now. Sophie was not just a co-worker, she was James's lover. Claire stood motionless, unable to process what she was seeing. Her mind screamed, but her body stayed still. This woman, this stranger, was the one who had taken her place. Claire, thinking to herself, who is she? Who does she think she is? Why is she with him? She couldn't bear it anymore. She turned away quickly, the tears she'd been holding back streaming down her face. Her heart ached so much that she thought she might collapse. She didn't know what to do, how to process the pain, but she knew she couldn't let this slide. That night, when James came home, Claire was already waiting for him. She stood by the door, her fists clenched, her entire body tense with anger and betrayal. Her heart pounded in her chest as she glared at him, desperate for an explanation. She couldn't stay silent any longer. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice sharp, trying to hold back the tears. James, appearing disheveled and distant, didn't even look at her as he walked past, ignoring her question entirely. His eyes were empty, the same eyes she once found comfort in, now cold and unfeeling. Claire felt the fire rising within her, her patience wearing thin. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," she demanded, her voice rising. James stopped and slowly turned to face her, his expression one of complete indifference. There was no apology, no remorse, just arrogance. He sneered as if he had already decided that this was nothing more than a petty confrontation. "Honestly, Claire, do you really expect me to care?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think I'm going to sit here and explain myself? You're nothing but a joke." Claire's stomach twisted with disgust. The man she once loved, the man who once promised to never hurt her, now stood before her with nothing but contempt. "Why?" she choked out, unable to stop herself. "Why would you do this to me? After everything, after I gave up everything to be with you?" James let out a bitter laugh, crossing his arms. "You gave up everything? Please. You think you sacrificed anything? You were just too naive to see what you had. You think you're some kind of princess, some perfect little rich girl who deserves to be worshipped? If you really cared about me, you would have brought your family's fortune and given it to me long ago. You think you're too good for me now because you chose to throw away your precious inheritance?" His words hit Claire like a slap to the face. She could feel the sting of each word, the weight of his disrespect. But she wasn't done yet. "I did what I thought was best. I loved you, James. You never needed my family's money. I thought we were building something together." James's expression twisted into a smirk, a look of pure disdain on his face. "Building something?" he scoffed. "What, you think I've been playing along because I love you? No, Claire, I was playing the part, just like you. I kept you around because it suited me. I don't need you to save me, and I sure as hell don't need your family's money. But if you'd just been smart, you would have used it to support me instead of living in this pathetic little bubble, thinking you're above everyone else." Claire's heart felt like it was shattering. How could the man she loved say such cruel things? She reached out, her voice trembling. "So, you've been using me all along?" James took a step closer, his voice cold and biting. "If you think you're some kind of delicate flower, Claire, you're wrong. You're just too blind to see it. You think I owe you an explanation? You think I owe you anything? You should have known better. You're the fool here, not me." Claire's face flushed with anger, and the tears she had been holding back finally fell. "I trusted you," she yelled, her voice breaking. "I gave you everything, James, and you repay me by betraying me with her, with Sophie. You never loved me?" James's face twisted into a scowl, his patience wearing thin. "Shut up, Claire," he shouted, shoving her back. "You think I owe you loyalty? I didn't ask you to throw your life away for me. If you knew anything about the real world, you would have figured out long ago that you're just another rich girl playing at being a martyr. You're not special, and you should have known better than to expect me to worship you." The words hit Claire like a physical blow. She stumbled back, her hands pressing against her chest, as if trying to stop the ache that was growing there. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't the man she had given up everything for. This was someone else, someone cruel and cold. "James," she whispered, the tears streaming down her face, "you're not the man I thought you were." With a final glance, James turned away from her. "I'm done. I'm tired of this game, Claire. You were never the prize. I'm leaving." Without another word, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Claire stood there, numb, her entire body trembling, as the sound of the door closing echoed through the empty house. But the final blow wasn't over. Claire knew he wasn't just walking away. As she looked through the window, she saw Sophie waiting outside, leaning casually against the streetlight. Sophie was the one James had been seeing behind her back, the one who had taken her place. As James walked toward her, Claire could feel the weight of her betrayal settle into her bones. Sophie flashed a smile at him, and without a second glance at Claire, James climbed into her car, his back turned to everything he had once promised. Claire collapsed onto the floor, her hands gripping the carpet, her chest heaving with pain. "How could he?" she thought. "How could I have been so blind?" The house suddenly felt colder, emptier, as the realization hit her. James was gone, and now so was her old life. This rewrite intensifies the argument between Claire and James, with James expressing more contempt and Claire reaching the breaking point before he leaves her for Sophie. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments or expansions. As soon as James slammed the door behind him, Claire felt an overwhelming surge of emotion. Her chest tightened with a mixture of pain, rage, and an undeniable clarity. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't stay in this house anymore, surrounded by the memories of the man who had betrayed her. The life she had once known was gone, and with it, any hope of reconciliation. Without wasting another moment, Claire grabbed a few important belongings, a few clothes, her passport, and a couple of valuable documents, stuffing them hastily into a small suitcase. She paused only for a moment to look around, her mind still reeling from the brutal confrontation with James. The house, once a symbol of her happiness, now felt suffocating. She called a taxi, not giving herself time to second-guess her decision. The car ride felt like an eternity. Claire didn't say a word, her gaze fixed out the window as the city passed by in a blur. She had to get away. The only place where she could think clearly, where she could plan her next move, was the place she had always kept hidden from the world. The private mansion her parents had bought for her when she was younger, a place far from prying eyes and expectations. The taxi finally stopped in front of a secluded, gated estate, far removed from the busy streets of the city. Claire paid the driver, stepping out into the quiet, empty yard. The mansion, surrounded by tall trees and sprawling lawns, had always been her secret retreat. She had never told James about this place, and now it was the only place where she could gather herself and begin to take control. Once inside, Claire immediately made a call. She didn't hesitate for a second. She dialed the number of David, her father's trusted assistant. He had always been more than just an employee. He was someone who had been loyal to her family for years, someone who knew how to get things done without drawing attention. She knew she could rely on him now. Claire, with calm authority. "David, I need you to do something for me. I want you to track down everything on James, his finances, his connections, everything. I don't care what it takes. Do it now? There was a brief pause on the line, and Claire could sense the slight hesitation in David's voice. David: "Of course, Miss Claire. I'll get started immediately. But, this won't be simple. He's been careful." Claire, coldly: "I don't care. I need him to pay. Do whatever it takes." Once the call ended, Claire took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. It was time to make James pay for everything. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing him that he had underestimated her. She had always been in control. Now she would take back everything he had tried to destroy. Later that evening, David made a call to Claire's father. The connection between the two men was subtle, but they understood each other perfectly. When David reported the situation, there was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. David: "Sir, Claire has already started taking action. She's moved to the estate. She's ordered me to start gathering all the information on James. It's clear she's not going to let this go." There was a slight chuckle on the other end, and Claire's father, Mr. Lancaster, responded with a calm, almost amused tone. Mr. Lancaster, smirking: "The little girl has started playing her game already, huh? She's showing more than a little of her old spirit. All right, David, you know what to do. Follow her instructions and make sure she gets everything she needs. Don't let her down." David nodded, understanding the weight of the task. He knew exactly how to proceed. Claire had always been one to act quickly when she made up her mind, and he respected that. He had been watching her for years, though Claire had never known just how closely he observed her. He was the one who had kept tabs on James all along, knowing what was happening before Claire ever did. It was his job to make sure that Claire always had the upper hand, even when she didn't know it. David, to himself: "Let's see how far she's willing to go this time." David, as the assistant to Claire's father, had always played his role perfectly. On the surface, he appeared as nothing more than a loyal employee, but behind the scenes, he was far more than that. He had known Claire since she was young, and he understood the importance of keeping things hidden, of protecting her from harm. But he also knew that, in the world Claire's family inhabited, sometimes the best way to protect someone was to allow them to strike back, to fight their battles with the right tools in hand. David had been following James for months, watching him, gathering intelligence, and reporting back to Claire's father. He had been the one to inform Mr. Lancaster of James's shifting behavior, his growing greed, his secretive meetings with potential investors, and his betrayal of Claire. But Claire had never suspected that David was always 2 steps ahead of her, making sure that her plans would unfold perfectly. As Claire began to execute her plan, David remained in the shadows, quietly pulling the strings that would set her up for success. He was not just an assistant, he was her ally, her silent partner in this game of revenge. He had his own reasons for playing his part, but above all, he believed in Claire. She was capable of so much more than anyone gave her credit for. This was just the beginning. Claire's thoughts: "I will destroy everything he thought he had. No one crosses me and gets away with it. Not James, not anyone. It's time he learns that the girl he thought was weak is stronger than he could ever imagine." The night seemed endless at the Lancaster estate, a sprawling property nestled in the heart of the countryside, far removed from the chaos of the city. The mansion, though beautiful and grand, felt cold and impersonal to Claire. It was here, in the quiet of her family's secretive world, that Claire could finally begin her meticulous revenge. James had no idea what was coming for him. He was living in his bubble of arrogance, surrounded by Sophie, the woman who had stolen him away from Claire. They were tangled in each other's arms, unaware of the storm that was brewing just outside the realm of their petty lives. Claire had carefully retreated into the shadows, remaining at the mansion where the wealth and power of her family could shield her from the outside world. But even here, she would make sure James would be exposed piece by piece. Claire sat in the dimly lit study, the glow of her laptop casting sharp shadows across her face. The family had always been known for their calm and calculated demeanor. The Lancasters had built their wealth through ruthless business tactics, always playing the long game. And now, Claire was following in their footsteps, using the tools she had learned over the years. She wasn't going to throw her life away on emotions. Not this time. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she finalized the first batch of evidence. The documents she had pulled were damning. Proof of James's involvement in money laundering, evidence of his shady deals with organized crime syndicates, and confidential files that exposed his corruption in several business ventures. Claire knew the moment these were leaked, the walls around James would begin to crumble. She could feel the rush of satisfaction, but something was still missing the face of the man who had destroyed her. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen, a bitter smile curling on her lips. Claire, thinking to herself, I thought I could escape my family's world. I thought love could make me different. But now I see it. I am just like them. The coldness, the calculation, it runs through my veins. She could feel the old instincts rising. The Lancasters were always known for their ruthlessness in the business world. Their dealings were shrouded in secrecy, and their ability to bring down anyone who stood in their way was legendary. Claire wasn't going to let herself be an exception to that. She would let James taste the same cruelty she had been shielded from for so long. But there was one difference. She wasn't as cold as her family. She had wanted to be soft, to live a life free from the relentless ambition of the upper class. She had fallen in love with James because he had represented everything her family wasn't. He had been the warmth she had craved. But now he had made her realize that the Lancaster blood ran deeper than she'd ever imagined. Days passed, and each step of Claire's plan was set into motion. The first article, exposing James's shady dealings, was released, sending shockwaves through the business community. His face was everywhere, his name tarnished in the headlines. But Claire didn't stop there. She made sure to have the financial documents sent to the most influential investors, revealing how James had embezzled funds and had been involved in numerous illegal trade deals. The final blow would come when Sophie began to feel the pressure. The relationship between James and his mistress would soon crumble, and Claire was ready to watch it unfold. Claire, thinking to herself, "You think you've won, Sophie? You think he's yours now? Watch as he falls." One evening, when Claire checked her phone, she saw a flood of notifications. Sophie's name was everywhere. It seemed that the press had caught on to the affair, and it was only a matter of time before the details about Sophie's own involvement in James's shady dealings would come to light. It was the perfect storm. Claire's plan was working flawlessly. Meanwhile, in James's apartment, he and Sophie had a violent argument. Sophie was livid. She could no longer ignore the whispers, the reports, the mounting pressure from the media. James had promised her a life of luxury, but now everything was beginning to unravel. Sophie, shouting, "What the hell is going on, James? You promised me everything, and now this? You're a joke." James, yelling back, frustrated, "You think I have control over this? I'm trying to fix it, okay? Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted to ruin everything?" Sophie, mocking, "Ruin everything. You've ruined me. You don't get it, do you? The world is turning on us. And it's not just your business, it's us now. You promised me the world, but now all I have is a broken man who's drowning in his lies." James, glaring, "It's not my fault. Do you think I don't know what's going on? Claire, she's behind this. She's the one who's exposing me. She's the one who's doing this." Sophie laughed bitterly, her face twisted in anger. "Sophie, you can blame her all you want, James, but the truth is, you're the one who let her go. You're the one who played with her, and now we're both paying the price. You'll never escape this." James slammed his fist against the wall, his face contorted with rage. He had no way of stopping the chaos now. The consequences of his betrayal were starting to consume him, and he knew it was only going to get worse. Back at the estate, Claire watched as the last piece of her plan fell into place. She could already hear the sounds of James's empire collapsing. Sophie's involvement was now undeniable. She had been the one whispering in James's ear, enabling him to push Claire aside. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, all of it was coming to light. But Claire wasn't done. She had one final move. She called David once more, her voice low and steady. "Claire, make sure he knows. Everything will be taken from him. The final blow is coming. I want him to feel every single ounce of what he's done to me." David, with his usual cool demeanor, replied simply, "David, understood, Miss Claire. It will be done." Just as everything seemed to be falling apart for James, Claire received a call from her father, Mr. Lancaster, on the phone, calm. "Well done, Claire. You've done exactly what needed to be done. But don't forget, you're not done yet. There's one last thing." Claire, surprised. "What do you mean?" Mr. Lancaster, with a sinister chuckle. "James isn't the only one who betrayed you. Think about it. The moment you let him go was the moment he started unraveling. You've been too focused on him. Now it's time to look around. I'm sending you someone to finish the job, Claire, but this time, make sure you don't just break him. End it completely." The final blow hadn't been what Claire expected. The last twist in her revenge plan wasn't just about James. It was about a greater game of power, of control. Claire wasn't just a victim of James's betrayal. She was a player in a much larger game. And as the realization dawned on her, she couldn't help but smile. The luxurious five-star resort was nestled by the sea, a paradise of calm with an air of elegance and grandeur. Its glass windows reflected the sun, casting soft shadows over the meticulously arranged gardens. Inside, the air smelled faintly of expensive perfume and polished wood, a place where the rich and powerful came to escape the world for a moment. It was here that Claire had agreed to meet James, though he had no idea that the woman he was about to beg for help was none other than his betrayed wife. The VIP suite of the resort was a private, exclusive space, the perfect setting for a meeting where things were going to be decided that would change the course of their lives. The large windows overlooked the ocean, and the furnishings were lush, from the velvet chairs to the golden-trimmed chandeliers that glistened softly. Claire had dressed in a way that spoke volumes without uttering a word, a sleek black dress that hugged her curves, her hair perfectly styled, and makeup that made her look both sophisticated and untouchable. She had been in the business world for years now, but she had never fully embraced the cold ruthlessness her family had built their fortune on. Until now. James had pushed her to this point. She had to become the version of herself she never thought she'd have to be. James sat nervously in the plush armchair, tapping his foot anxiously as he waited for Claire to enter. He had spent the past week calling in every favor, reaching out to anyone who might be able to help him salvage what was left of his crumbling empire. No one had answered. Everyone had turned their backs on him, except for Claire. He had no idea that the woman he had betrayed, the woman he had lost, was now the one he was pleading with. He didn't recognize it yet, but this was his last chance. The door opened and Claire stepped inside, her presence overwhelming. Her eyes locked with his, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. James stood up, his mouth opening, but no words came. The room was filled with a quiet tension as Claire walked toward the center of the room, her gaze unwavering, her steps measured and purposeful. James, finally breaking the silence. "Claire, I didn't expect—" Claire, cutting him off. "No, you didn't expect to see me, did you?" Her voice was calm, almost detached. Her words, however, hit James like a slap in the face. She was standing there, poised and powerful. The woman he had hurt so deeply. The woman he had taken for granted. She sat down in the chair across from him, her posture perfect, hands resting lightly on her lap. James was visibly shaken, but Claire remained stoic, every inch of her the woman he never thought he would lose. Until now. James, desperate. I know I messed up, Claire. I know. I've lost everything and I need help. You're the only one who can save me now. Please, I don't know who else to turn to." Claire didn't flinch. She sat there silently, her eyes boring into him, as if she were analyzing every word, every movement. James had thought he could control her, manipulate her with his charm and sweet words, but now he saw a woman who was no longer moved by his pleas. He had turned her into someone else, someone colder, more determined, someone who had seen the worst of him and would never go back. James, desperately pleading, "I can make it right, Claire. I swear. I've been blind, I've been stupid. But I'm not asking for your forgiveness, I'm asking for a chance to rebuild everything. Please, let me prove it to you. Let me prove that I can fix this." Claire, with a bitter smile. "Fix it? You can't fix what you've broken, James. You had it all, and you threw it away for a cheap affair, for the thrill of power. You thought you could leave me and get away with it. But what did you think? That I would just sit back and let you destroy everything I had worked for? That I would sit here, helpless, while you got everything?" Her words stung, and James could feel the weight of them, his chest tightening with guilt and shame. Claire, leaning forward slightly, her voice lowering. "You didn't think this through, did you? You thought you were untouchable. But everything you've done, everything you've tried to hide, it's all out in the open now." She paused, watching as James's face fell, his arrogance crumbling beneath the weight of her words. She could see him fighting to hold himself together, but it was clear he was beginning to understand just how far his empire had fallen. "James," voice breaking, "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to lose everything. Claire, I loved you. I still love you." Claire's eyes softened for a moment, the smallest flicker of emotion flashing through her. But then, just as quickly, she composed herself, the steely mask of control returning. "Claire, love? You don't even know what love is. If you did, you wouldn't have done what you did. You destroyed everything we had, James. You destroyed me. You destroyed us. And now you want me to save you? To pull you out of the mess you created? You're on your own." James, falling to his knees. "Please, Claire, I'm begging you. I've made so many mistakes, but I can't lose you. I can't lose everything. I've failed. I know I've failed, but I don't want to die alone." Tears welled in his eyes as he looked up at her. The man who once stood tall and proud now reduced to nothing. The weight of his actions crushed him, but Claire didn't feel sorry for him. She couldn't. Claire, coldly with an unwavering gaze. "If you hadn't betrayed me, if you hadn't thrown everything away, maybe you could have been a billionaire, James. You had everything within your reach, but you chose Sophie. You chose power, and now you will lose everything. You will pay the price for your choices, and I will make sure of it." James's eyes widened, and he gasped as he realized the full weight of her words. Claire stood up, walking toward the door, but before she left, she turned to him one last time, her face expressionless. "Claire, I swore an oath before the spirit of the child we lost, James. I swore I would never let you live in peace, and I'm going to make sure that promise is kept. You'll never have peace. Not now, not ever." With that, Claire stepped out of the room, her heels clicking against the floor as she walked away. James remained on the floor, shattered, unable to comprehend the full extent of his downfall. His cries filled the room, but there was no one left to listen. Claire had taken everything from him, and there was no coming back from this. A few days later, the headlines were everywhere. James Lancaster and Sophie arrested for embezzlement, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. Claire sat back in her seat, watching the news unfold on her iPad. She couldn't help but feel a sense of cold satisfaction. The world now knew what James had done, and there was no escaping the consequences. Later that day, Claire sat by the window of the estate, deep in thought. The door opened quietly, and her mother entered, her presence as commanding as ever. Claire's mother. "You've done well, Claire. But this is just the beginning. There are many more challenges waiting for you." Claire, with a small, knowing smile. "I know, Mother, but for the first time, I feel in control. I'm ready." Days passed, and Claire's life began to take an even more dramatic turn. Her father's business empire, once at the mercy of James's manipulations, was now fully under her control. Claire assumed the role of CEO of Lancaster Enterprises, and her transformation was immediate. Her demeanor was cold, calculating, and precise. The board members trembled at her every decision. She had become the woman her family had always wanted her to be, a force to be reckoned with in the cutthroat world of business. Her rise to power was swift, but there was one thing Claire knew for sure. James had underestimated her, and now she was going to prove that the Lancaster legacy had always been her birthright, and she would stop at nothing to claim it. In the end, Claire Lancaster wasn't just the woman scorned. She was a leader, a strategist, and a survivor. someone who knew how to play the game, even if it meant walking over the ruins of everything she once loved. And as she sat at her desk, her empire now firmly in her grasp, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She had won, and no one, not even James, could ever take that away from her. Claire's journey teaches us a painful lesson about betrayal and trust. It shows how even those we love most can hurt us, but it also highlights the power of resilience and revenge. Claire's rise from the depths of heartbreak to reclaim her power is both tragic and empowering. It's a reminder that wealth and success don't protect us from the consequences of our actions. James, despite his success, loses everything due to his greed and betrayal, showing that no amount of wealth can shield someone from their wrongdoings. The story also explores the idea that wealth and power often come at a steep price. Claire, born into a family known for its ruthless business dealings, learns to navigate this world with the same cold calculation. Yet, even as she embraces this darker side, we see her pain a reflection of the sacrifices made for power and the emotional cost of betrayal. Her loss of a child due to James's betrayal shows that even the most powerful figures carry deep scars that money cannot heal. Claire's story raises important questions. Is revenge ever justified? Does wealth truly bring happiness, or does it leave us vulnerable? What would you do in Claire's shoes? Join the discussion. Share your thoughts on betrayal, power, and the price of ambition.